Alright, this is going to demonstrate a simulation using random numbers showing a game board and wanting to move 10 spaces, exactly 10 spaces, in order to win a game. And you're using a random number list to figure out how many times it's going to take you to win the game. And since the random numbers have the numbers 0 and 7 through 9 in them, and you're rolling a die when you're playing this game, you're going to skip those values 0, 7, 8, and 9, and you're not going to count those as a turn. But everything else is going to count as a turn. And you have to move exactly 10 spaces. You can't move more than 10 spaces. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to show you how to perform this simulation. Okay, what I have done is I basically put the numbers up here, the random numbers that the problem gave us up here so we can keep track of it. And so I'm going to show you that when we are playing this game, the random number 4 up here, the first number, is demonstrating that I roll a 4 on a set of die. So my first random number that I pick is a 4. And that means that I move 4 spaces. So that would be considered my first turn. My next random number that I draw is an 8, and I can't roll an 8 on a 6-sided die, so that means I'm going to just skip this number, and I'm not going to count this as a turn. My next random number is a 5, so that means I move 5 spaces, so that would be considered my second turn. And so right now I've moved a total of 9 spaces. My next random number is a 0, and I can't roll a 0, so I'm going to skip it, and I'm not going to count that as a turn. My next random number is a 5, and that means I would move 5 spaces, but I actually can't do that, so I'm not going to move at all, but I still have to count that as a turn. So somehow keep track of the difference between whether you skip it. I'm using a straight line for when I skip it, and a 5 I can't move that, so I just kind of squiggly line that, but I count it as a turn. And so then my next random number is a 1, and so that means I can move 1 space. So if I add 1 to the 9 that I previously had, that means that that is 10 moves, and that means I would win the game, and so that would be my 4th turn. So this would complete trial 1, and trial 1 here, it took me 4 turns in order to win it. Okay, so now this is going to start trial 2. So trial 1 ended up here with the random number 1. So I'm going to just kind of draw a line here. That's where I stopped. And so my next trial 2, my next random number here, let's go ahead and label this random number, and this is what I'm moving, and these are my turns. My next random number is a 3. That means I move 3 spaces, and that would be considered my first turn. My next random number is a 9, so I'd skip it. It doesn't count as a turn. My next random number is a 7. Skip it. Doesn't count as a turn. My next random number is a 4. That means I can move 4 spaces, and that would be my second turn. So right now I've moved a total of 7. So that means I'm looking for a 3 when I do this. So my next random number is a 4. I have to count it, but I can't move it. My next random number is an 8. I skip it. My next random number is a 9. I skip it. My next random number is a 7. I skip it. My next random number is a 5. I have to count that, so that is my 4th turn. My next random number is a 1, and I can move 1 space, so that makes me a 5th turn, and I have now moved a total of 8 spaces. So now I'm looking for a 2, and luckily my next random number is a 2, so I can move 2 spaces, and that would be considered my 6th turn. So this is considered trial 2, and in trial 2 it took me 6 turns in order to win the game. Okay, so this is now showing trial 3. And remember that trial 2 ended with this 2 right here. So in trial 3, my first random number is a 2. So that means I'm going to move 2 spaces. That'd be my first turn. My next random number is a 3. I'm going to move 3 spaces. That's a turn. So I've now moved a total of 5. My next random number is an 8. And so I'm going to skip it. My next random number is a 1, and so I can move 1, so that would be considered my 3rd turn. So I have now moved a total of 6 spaces. My next random number is a 4, and I can move 4 spaces because right here I'd had 6 and 4. That gives me 10. So then that would consider my 4th turn. So on trial 3, oops, sorry, kind of messy handwriting there. Trial 3, it took me 4 turns. Okay, so now we're going to start trial 4. So trial 4, my first random number is a 7. So that one's a skip. Don't count it as a turn. My next random number is a 2. So I move 2 spots. So that's my first turn. My next random number is a 9. I skip it. My next random number is a 2. I can move 2. So that's my second turn. My next random number is a 0. I skip it. My next random number is an 8. I skip it. My next random number is a 9, I skip it. My next random number is a 0, I skip it. My next random number is a 2, I have to count that. So that's actually my third turn. So right now I have 2, 4, 6 moves, and my next random number is a 4. That gives me 10 moves, and then that would be considered a 4th turn. So in trial 4 here, it took me 4 turns. Now you would continue to do this process for 10 trials. And so then when you get done doing this process, you would take your turns that you had for each trial, add them up, and then divide by 10 because you had 10 trials to find the average number of turns that you have to win the game.